Diamond, Diamond.
A precious gem of the most valuable kind. When pure, it is clear.
Diamond, Diamond.
A family name bringing traditions of love, hard work, and moral values.
This is the Diamond Education Podcast with my mom and dad, John and Kelly England.
Welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast with John and Kelly England. We're here to help you find the most valuable education for your child.
And we are excited today to have Paul Peterson on with us. When Paul was 13 years old, he knew what he wanted to help others. He came up with the idea of opening a treatment center and providing the best treatment everyone in the world had ever received. Paul attended BYU, receiving his bachelor's degree in psychology, and later received his master's in social work from the University of Utah, and thus began his journey in behavioral health. Through various work experiences, Paul stumbled upon the treatment of OCD and anxiety. He was fortunate to have the opportunity to specialize in the treatment. With such a successful treatment, he went to work opening the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center with several brilliant people. The OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center has expanded since their humble opening in 2015. They currently have 3 locations and are working on a 4th and don't plan to stop there. He says it has been an exciting journey. They are achieving one of the highest reductions of symptoms in the world. His childhood dream of providing the best treatment in the world has become a reality. Paul, welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So just to kind of give our listeners a preface. So I actually struggle with an anxiety disorder, and a few of our loved ones who are close to us have. And the OCD and Anxiety Clinic is very dear and near to our heart because they have been such a huge blessing in our lives through what we have learned through them. So we were like, we need to reach out to Paul and have him on because it does affect a child's education with their mental health. And
absolutely. And that, as a former principal and teacher, like I saw it all the time where children would come in with anxiety, and it definitely got in the way of their opportunity to learn. And so we felt like this was something very important to have you on and talk about for parents.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it.
So, well, first of all, Paul, we want to talk about the history of the OCD and Anxiety Center and why did you start it?
Yeah, it was interesting. Some people have heard my story, but back when I first was married, my wife started showing some symptoms of OCD. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I was a therapist at that time, and all the techniques that I was using, that I was taught, never really worked with her. I was told, hey, get a rubber band, flick the wrist, 2 positives for a negative, write in your journal, explore your past. None of those things really changed what was happening. And it wasn't until my son was born 3.5 years later, it was 3.5 years later. And then when he was another 1.5 years after that, so 5 years, his OCD started to explode. And man, it was rough. And at that point, I'm like, I need to specialize in this thing. And I honestly feel like it was just a miracle that I ran into the International OCD Foundation. And within just a few weeks, I was out in Washington, D.C., going to their conference. And truly, when I came back, I had been enlightened. I had learned that there is this evidence-based treatment that is the most effective treatment in the world, that about 99% of the therapists don't even know it exists, or they don't use it, or if they do, they don't know how to really use it. And I came back, and I had picked up some mentors when I was out there, and within the first year, it was amazing. And then I started my first intensive outpatient program, and the first person who came in within a couple of months went from completely non-functioning to functioning, moving out of parents' home, getting their own apartment, started dating, end up getting married, all these things that they had just given up on because for over a decade, their life had been wrecked by OCD. And it was such an amazing experience to go through that. And then I'm like, I need to start this. I need to get more people help. And so I started creating my army, and I started getting students, and it was an interesting journey because my first student from the University of Utah she didn't stay with me afterwards. She's like, I don't want to specialize in this. Like, and so the next year I'm like, well, I'll get 2 more. And those 2, they didn't stay either. Like, so the next year I did 5 students and 1 stayed. And then the next year I did 5 more students and 1 stayed. And then finally, the next year I had 1 more stay, and I went back to that second group, and I poached Lynn Sill, who is our COO, and she came in, and man, we were able to officially start the center. And I'll tell you, you help one person, and they feel something they haven't felt in such a long time, they go tell everybody.
Yeah.
And that really has been what has made us so successful is we don't hope that we can help, we do help. And to such a degree that everybody, it's been like this hellstorm.
Yeah.
It's like so fast. And our vision is to help as many people as we can. And we're working on it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And that has been something that for the people that we know in our life that have gone through your treatment center, some of our loved ones, like it has opened their world, and that has been like one of the most amazing aspects of going in there, because their world just seemed to shrink every time they experienced whatever it was.
Yes.
And I think maybe for our listeners, I think there is definitely a stigma and maybe like a Hollywoodization of what OCD is.
Yeah.
Would you mind just explaining to our listeners, what is OCD?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yes, you are exactly right. The world has a stigma of it. You watch Monk and they think that it's contamination or being orderly. And the reality is, yes, there is some of that with OCD, but actually probably like 95% of people who have OCD is very different than that. So let me reel back a minute. So OCD is where a person gets an intrusive thought, and that intrusive thought triggers this fight or flight response. The intensity is so intense that, you don't feel something for nothing. So if that intensity is there must be some truth. And so if I have an intrusive thought that, hey, I'm driving, I think that I'm going to run somebody over, and I all of a sudden get a 10 out of 10 of distress, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I might have almost done that. And it happens again. OCD wants you to create certainty. It wants you to make sure that you didn't do that thing. And if you can make sure you didn't, then you can actually get some relief sometimes. And so that even like with contamination, that person's worried that they might get sick. And so that's the obsession. And then you got the compulsion. The compulsion is, I'm going to do something to create that certainty, to create that safety, because it is such a terrible feeling. And what's interesting is most people who have anxiety or fear, they can experience it for seconds. But people with OCD, they could feel it for an hour. They could feel it for an entire day, a whole week. Can you imagine feeling for one entire month, having the same feeling as if somebody was running at you with a machete?
Yeah.
Right.
And it just doesn't go down. And in fact, that intensity can get worse if you don't do all these things to make it go away. And so, but with OCD, like I said, that contamination, everybody associates that as it. But man, what we see is, I'm worried about doing the wrong thing. Did I hurt somebody? Did I want to hurt somebody? Did I run somebody over? What if I was blasphemous? What if I wanted to kill Jesus?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that what I've seen is the intrusive thoughts that people have with OCD are actually the same thoughts that everybody has in the world. The only difference is somebody who doesn't have OCD, they have the thought and they move on. 0 to 10, they're a 0. They get that intrusive thought. They're like, well, that was stupid. That was weird.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from? And we probably know, like, yeah, I watched that movie. That person was raped. That was a terrible thing to see. And then, yeah, I might have a thought like, wow, what if I was a rapist? Oh, that's stupid. But what if I had OCD and all of a sudden I have that thought, like, what if I was a rapist? And all of a sudden I'm like a 12 out of 10. I'm like redlining. Well, holy cow, maybe there's something here. Now I've got to do these compulsions to prove to myself, to really reflect my intentions and would I really do that thing to somebody. And once I can finally kind of get it sorts to some degree, I can feel that relief, like, okay, maybe I'm not that terrible, horrible person.
Yeah.
OCD, they call people with OCD the silent sufferers.
Yeah.
Because how do you describe to somebody to say, hey, I literally have this horrific emotion that's racing through my body all the time. And if I tell you what that thought is about, you wouldn't even want to be by me. What if the thought is that I think I might have be a pedophile? I might have touched a child inappropriately. Well, how do you tell somebody? They're never going to let you be around their children. The thing though is somebody who has OCD, who has pedophilia OCD, which is like a lot of people with OCD have that one. They're like the best person to watch your kid because they're the last person on this world that would ever want to do it. And in fact, they're going to be so certain that they did, and that like your kid would be the safest on this planet. But the world doesn't know that. They think, oh, pedophile. Ooh, I wouldn't even want to risk it.
Yeah. There's definitely that stigma and fear in our society with that. And to Paul, so first off, because actually I met with you one time, and something that always, a conversation with you that always stood out is when I told you, well, 80% of the time I'm happy. Do you remember what you told me? It was huge. So in my life.
I probably said, well, so what about the other 20%?
Yeah.
You know?
And you were like, and you compared it to another illness, right? Like,
what if 20% of the time you blood was seeping out of you? What if only 20% of the time? Would that be an acceptable amount?
Would I say, like, well, 80% of the time I'm okay, like
no, 80, that's not enough. I mean, life is about being happy. It's about finding joy. It's not about existing and getting through it. And 20% of the time, that's terrible. It's like, wow, like 20% of the time my hand feels like it's going to fall off my body. Yeah, but I'm not going to go to the doctor. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to continue trudging along because 80% of the time I feel regular.
Yeah. And to go along with that, like what you said, you feel like a bad person, and that you are a bad person because of those intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It is scary to share. It's very real. It's like telling somebody like who's afraid of heights, they have to be on that cliff.
Yeah.
The whole time. And so
absolutely, the OCD, starts in the amygdala, and ultimately these messages get sent to the frontal cortex, which is the reasoning part of the brain. And so truly in our life, if I have a thought like, if I'm a 10 out of 10, there's something happening. There's got to be truth. But with OCD, there's never truth. I mean, like for you, how many times has that bad thing ever happened?
Never.
Never. But how many times did it feel like it was going to happen?
Oh, all the time, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's I call that the big lie of OCD.
Yeah.
OCD steals away your life based on something that might have happened or could happen, or versus actually happening. And the reality is I actually would love for it to happen, because at least then I can deal with the feelings appropriately. Like, okay, if I did hit somebody driving, then I guess I'll deal with that, versus I'm going to literally lose my life day after day worrying that I might have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems like with the loved ones that we know, it seems like it attaches to the parts of their life that they care the most about. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is that true? Like that's been,
that's so funny that you say that, because that's kind of the thing I say. I say like OCD is like this it's like this little scourge in you, and it goes into you and finds what you value the most and then exploits it. And that's the thing, is that OCD, the thing that you fear, is not your problem.
Yeah.
What your problem is that your brain is malfunctioning. The brain is sending a wrong message, meaning I'm having a thought and my brain is sending me this gigantic feeling about it. That's not supposed to happen. And those other 98% of the population, that's not happening to them either. It's not because they're better or done something different. Their brain just is not broken. And it was crazy. And I've said this many times in my presentations, like from here below, we can accept that something can be broken. But from here above, no, it can't be broken. It's our fault. We need to try harder. We need to allow the atonement of Christ in life. We need to be better. We need to be a better parent. We need to stop. We need to repent. We need to, no,
Yeah.
that is not what it is. And so when we're working with OCD, we don't focus on, well, we do focus on the topic, but it's the topic of what they're afraid of. And just like you were saying, like it goes to what you care about. Well, today I care about this. Like maybe I'm not married, I'm going to school, and now my fear is that I'm going to accidentally plagiarize, or maybe I'm keep talking to the teachers, compulsing, telling them maybe I think I might have done it. I end up getting kicked out. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then, wow, I'm married, and now do I love this person? Do I think maybe I'm not? Maybe I married the wrong person. I have this relationship OCD now happening. Now I have a child. Now did I touch my child? Now my child's moving away. Maybe did I ever really love my child? I mean, like it can just pop from, what do you value? Oh, now I have a job. Am I being honest? Now should I clock out of my job at the times I'm working, because I don't feel like I'm really giving them the full effort, and so I need to give them the full effort. So now I'm working like 10 hours instead of my 8, because
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so
It's
compelled to
miserable.
do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The cycle is miserable. It's
Yeah.
sad. Yeah. So Paul, because I want you to kind of talk about your therapies, but you don't just treat OCD. Do you want to go into the other disorders you treat as well?
Yeah, so we do OCD. We also do anxiety and anxiety related disorders, and we also do trauma. But the golden thread with all of these is we do exposures. And because what we know is the brain is broken. We're not going to, think of somebody who has diabetes. If they're feeling dizzy, not they're going to pass out, you're not going to tell them like, well, did you read your scriptures today? Did you,
Yeah.
did you, 2 positives for a negative? You're probably like, so you probably should go test your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Probably should do that. And let's do a evidence-based treatment to deal with it. And that's what exposure and response prevention, or just using exposures or prolonged exposures, can do. It can literally change the dynamics of the brain, and you can start learning something new. You can learn just because I have this thought doesn't mean I need to react to it, or not only that, but because I am so certain that actually, let me go back. I'm worried that I need to know. That's what OCD says. I need to know. The treatment is not knowing, and the less you know, the more power you have over it. I mean, honestly, if you don't have OCD, why do you need to know? Why do you have to spend your life, 20% of your life, trying to make sure that something didn't happen, or couldn't have happened, or won't happen? No, actually, that 20% of my life, I want to enjoy the fact that it's snowing outside right now. And I want to enjoy that, it's going to be the weekend, and I've got fun things to do, and March Madness is happening, and
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of
live
those
life.
all of those things are so I think it's what makes life amazing, right? Are these little things. And you mentioned exposures, and I don't know that our listeners necessarily understand what an exposure is.
Yeah.
And so if you can just kind of briefly, what is an exposure, and what does that mean?
Right.
Let's say maybe I have a contamination like fear, right? I might get grandma sick, so I need to right? So what does that mean?
So what we end up having the person, we help them come to their treatment when it comes to exposure. So we're not going to dictate like you need to expose yourself to this or to that. We let them kind of go down that road, and with our help, obviously. But like somebody with worrying about getting their grandmother sick, well, we need to risk the possibility that grandma could get sick. risk that. And so maybe an exposure could be something like, I'm going to go an hour without washing my hands, and I'm just going to walk around my house with my unwashed hands, and maybe I'm going to touch something that I value, that I know that grandma might come around and touch. And I do this, and my brain's going to be like, you're such a terrible person. You do want grandma to die. You've always wanted her to die, and a 12 out of 10 anxiety, but what if I keep doing it? What if I don't stop just because I feel these big feelings? Well, what happens is the brain begins to learn something new. We call it inhibitory learning. It begins to learn this new thing, and very often that intensity will go down, not because they ran away from the monster, but because they faced the monster. And so then we'll have them do it again. And we'll have them do it again. And it gets to be a point where, hey, they're touching this pillow, but it really isn't triggering them. And when it doesn't trigger them, we're like, awesome. Isn't that wonderful? Because it shouldn't have in the first place.
Yeah.
And we can expand that. And we expand a little bit more. And once people can get trusting in the process, then we start creating this randomness. Like, hey, let's roll a dice. And are we going to go give grandma a hug? Are we going to make sure that grandma's going to get nice and good and sick? And do you know what will happen in the end by doing that? Nothing.
Yeah.
Grandma's not going to die. Nothing's going to happen. She's not at any more risk than she was before.
Yeah.
The only difference is that now I can be around grandma. I can love grandma. I get to have her be a part of my life again.
Yeah. I love that. I love it's the uncertainty, and there is beauty in it may be or maybe not will happen.
I don't know, but what's more important is, hey, it's snowing outside today.
Yeah. Well, and it's freeing. It really is freeing for a person to, that almost faith aspect, right? Like just letting life happen and I can enjoy it, And so, it's beautiful. So
we're an education podcast, and we've talked a lot about OCD and anxiety. How does that affect a child's ability to learn?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think you got to first think of it this way. So you have all of these kids at school, and not everybody has this problem. You've got, the statistics change each year as they do more and more, but it's like, is it 1.5, 2 people for every 100 who have OCD? Is it 6.3? The numbers change with who has social anxiety, how many have generalized anxiety. You got that cluster. Now, then you got everybody else. These other people who don't have their brains lying to them frequently. And those kids who do, they get clumped in as with all the kids. And they're treated as though they should just knock it off. They're looked at as a behavioral issue. And when it's a behavioral issue, well, how does it affect their education? So many different ways. If the kid's fidgeting and the teacher's punishing them, well, they're fidgeting because they're an 8 out of 10 and they don't know how to describe that they're feeling this much intensity, especially with everybody around, which then, I've actually explained it to some of my clients, think of somebody being on fire. They're on fire. How much do you think that somebody's on fire is going to learn in a classroom? Even if it's 20% of their body's on fire. Right?
Thanks, Paul.
Right?
Yeah.
If
Well, it's only
20%, like, guess what? Even if,
or maybe they're only on fire 20% of the time, right?
Or 20% of the time, like, okay, well, so if I didn't do well on that test, it wasn't a behavioral issue. It was, I wasn't doing okay. So if I'm on fire, I'm probably not focusing. I'm probably wanting to avoid things. and what's my retention supposed to be? I've had so many kids in the past, even adults now, that said, I'm just not very smart. I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, I actually think you're probably one of the smartest people in the room. That's what I find with people who have OCD or anxiety. Like, they're crazy smart. But it's like, how much are you retaining when you're on fire?
Right.
Like, because you can't. I've heard people like, I have the worst memory. Like, well, yeah, that person's talking to you, and in the background you're thinking, oh shoot, did I leave my oven on? And then my family's going to die because they're going to be expire from the gas that was left on my stove. And so I'm acting like I'm totally engaged in this conversation with this other person, then afterwards, like, I can't remember what they said, I'm so stupid. Like, no, you actually were distracted by tons of anxiety. If that didn't happen and that conversation were to happen again, you would have retained it all.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, and to go on into that, because you guys just don't do exposure response, you do the skills, the DBT skills associated that can help you participate in those skills, which are
so we'll use some of the DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy skills, so we can get them to do exposures. And really it's about regulating your mood, and being able to focus on being able to get to the exposures, because the exposures are the real treatment that works.
So because I love that those go hand in hand, because
there
are skills in that everybody
could.
And even thinking errors, we see thinking errors all the time in our world, that it's like, this isn't just for those struggling with OCD. As a world, I think we could use these skills. Well, and those skills would help people to understand the mental health problem going on too.
It's such an important topic, especially when it does come to learning, because it, like you said, it does affect their ability to learn when it's happening, right? What are some warning signs parents should watch out for if they suspect that maybe their child has OCD or any other anxiety related disorder?
Well, I would say like extreme mood swings. I see difficulty sleeping, a lot of appetite, stomach problems, weight gain, social withdrawal and isolation. That's a big one. Loss of interest in activities. They're just not interested in things that they used to like. They're just not. It's just not appealing to them. How about concentration, making decisions? I've got 2 kids who've gone through my program as well, and for them, they would always second guess everything. I mean, they're crazy smart people. They don't need me to ask, like, hey, Dad, can I? Oh, I'll give you an example. We were making cookies, before she did treatment, and I said, hey, put a cup of chocolate chips in the batter, and she said, okay. And then she's like, so these chocolate chips? Really? And then she got a cup, and then before she put it in, she asked me, Dad, should I put it in? I'm like, well, the first time we talked, he said, can you put a cup of chocolate chips in? That should have been enough. And then 2 more questions happened to confirm, because the last thing she'd want to do is the wrong thing. Other things I've seen, like, are they just sad, or do they feel hopeless? And then what about, in academics, is their work performance going down? My daughter's did. She's this brilliant girl, and then she's getting these 1s. Why is she getting a 1? Because 80% of her day was absorbed by all of this. And it was, she just went downhill. Another one, and this is a huge one, is, are they getting more aggressive or irritable? Like my daughter last night, even with OCD, anxiety, it's a chronic issue, a disorder, meaning that you're going to have it till the day you die. What we say is, are you going to control it, or is it going to control you? And so just like a diabetic, you can have downs, you can have ups. And last night, my daughter was absolutely triggered. And sometimes when she gets triggered, she is angry. She sputters out the meanest things, so irritable. But because we know what's happening, instead of treating it like a behavioral issue, we go straight to, and 0 to 10, where are you at? Like, oh, you're an 8 right now. Because your sister corrected you, and that triggers her. And And like, so what do you need to do about it?
Yeah.
And we ended up doing an exposure, and she was holding hands with her sister and having her sister continue to give her new corrections.
Uh-huh.
It's like, the treatment is about grabbing that monster in your life and slathering it all over yourself instead of avoiding it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that explanation. So I have a few questions off of that, Paul. So of course, being through the program and everything like that, a lot of times in those family groups, there are common themes that I noticed would come up. And one is a lot of families worry about whether kids are in the program or struggling, like, what about their education? And what about their grades and going to school? So I guess first I want to ask you that, like, what advice would you give parents for that?
Yes. Well, so I would say, so let's take that anxiety or OCD out of the equation, and let's say that let's say if their kid is let's say their kid is a 6 out of 10 all the time, meaning that people with anxiety, OCD, they have a baseline. They always feel distress. It's just sometimes it's more than others. And let's say their kid's a 5 or 6. Well, now let's convert that to physical health. So if their kid 50% of the time was screaming out in pain, and they go to take the kid to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, they've got horrific Crohn's disease, and we've got to do this and this and this, and their bowels could explode and all of the stuff, and it's gonna take the next 3 to 4 months to do this. We're gonna need you to come 3-4 times a week, for 6 to 8 hours, and you think the parent would say, yeah, I don't think we can miss school.
Right.
They would never ever do it.
Yeah.
Like, why? Well, because the risk of death, the risk of there's a doctor that's telling you that there's this problem and it's that serious that it's worth missing weeks, if not months of schooling to get repair. Oh, you got cancer? Yeah, 8 months. We can't go up to the Huntsman Cancer Institute 5 days a week, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. We can't. We don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
We do it. Oh, but anxiety. Well, I have anxiety. Everybody has anxiety. And that's the problem, is that people around those who are suffering, they connect their own experience with anxiety and think that their child or their spouse or a connected one should do what they do. And that's the thing, is like, if I had anxiety that lasted for 3 seconds, maybe somebody is running at me with the machete. But I get away, and 20 seconds later, my distress starts going down. Great. But somebody with OCD, 2 months later, and it's still not going down. Like, it's not the same. You can't put yourself you can't compare. They're literally suffering, the silent sufferers. And so what do I say? You know what? Your kid is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Your kid is going to, if they're in elementary school, it does not matter.
They're going to be, and as having loved ones go through it, they'll be okay.
Okay.
They are smart kids. They'll be okay. So
yes, I have a nephew who went through a program, and he said I could share his experience with anybody, but he was in high school, and he was out for a few months. And guess what? He took summer school. That's what he did. He made up, and guess what? He still went to college, and it all worked out. And that's what I would say, is it always will work out. Like, make the sacrifice. Like, you know what? Your kid's going to be okay. And just if you're having a problem connecting the dots, think of it as a physical health issue. Now, what's your decision? Oh, it's different? Then it shouldn't be any different, because OCD and anxiety, when it's disordered, is a physical health issue. You can see it in PET scans, MRIs. It's there. You see the malfunctioning. It's not a mental health issue. In fact, I would say, for hundreds of years, like, oh, mental health, people use that term. That's the wrong term to use. It is a physical health issue.
Yeah.
If your kidney's off, you're not like, ooh, I've got a kidney mental health. Like a disparaging thing. Like, no.
I think all of this is education. We all have different problems here on earth, different trials.
Yep.
And I mean, we are Christian. The Lord's given us different things in our life. to deal with, to learn and grow. And this is what these kids need to learn and grow to become a better person. And I think if you look at it that way, it's education as well, like these things, like, and it's just as important as a ceramics class, if not more important, right? Or you have to learn the algebra algorithm right now, right? Things like it all works out. We all have a plan. And
I like what you said, that, those DBT skills, everybody can learn them. I think that social media ruins it for everybody. The media ruins it for everybody. That you look at that person who has that wonderful shake, I wish I had one of those, or look at that car, or they got that stack of money, or look at that smile they have, and look how happy they are. And it's all a lie. Like, everybody has problems. And if you don't, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I wish there was this education, like, what are the skills to deal with hard things that come up next? Even like ecclesiastical leaders, teachers, like, they find themselves getting caught into being that therapist. They don't have the skill set. And you're exactly right. The natural thing to do is to accommodate. You go to that kid and they're really struggling, and you want to give them a hug and make it all better for them. And if they didn't have OCD or anxiety, it would totally be an appropriate behavior. But when they do, you are making it worse. You're giving validity to the thing that they're worried about, and saying, there's value to this thing when there isn't. Like, oh yeah, like last night, maybe your sister is better than you. Maybe she does know more than you. Maybe. Instead of, like,
which is hard.
Which is hard, because any other kid or any parent would be like, wow, that is harsh. But if I say, no, you are so smart, you're so incredible, you're so amazing, she's just being helpful, I give her all this accommodation, all these reassurances, and then guess what? It's going to happen again, and it's going to trigger, and then she's going to need all of that again, and then it's going to happen again, and she's going to need that all again. Versus, how about if she doesn't need it ever? She's going to hold hands with her sister and have her sister correct her, and she's smiling, and they were giggling afterwards, which is awesome, because before, for the rest of the night, it would be over. You would not stop being triggered for the rest of the night.
That's, I like how you kind of put it, with, like, it would just keep going and going and going, because I actually think the idea of, like, actually being validated for somebody's feelings versus reassured, I think is a lot more, like, useful. Of, like, we had a death in the family a little over a year ago, right? And if somebody comes up and be like, you'll get over it, like, that doesn't actually help me feel better. But if they're like, oh, I'm so sad for you, I can't imagine how hard that is. That's really, really hard. That feels a lot better in my life when I'm going through something hard, right? Because it's like, oh, they're understanding that I'm going through something hard, versus like, oh, like, even just getting over something sad, right? And I think that is something I wish more of us would. I wish we would stop reassuring people so much about the things that they're worried about. Even if they don't have an anxiety disorder, it's rather validate, but like, man, that would be really hard to worry about that.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
And then, so going back, so the second question, Paul, I would ask you, which a lot of parents, I heard, and then we even have had these concerns, if someone chooses not to participate, and they're moody, they're aggressive, they're all these things. What advice, I guess, as a family, how do you support them?
So if the parent's on board to get them treatment and the kid is not willing to do the treatment, so I actually believe that you can do it happily or you can do it unhappily. The kid's going to do it because it's not an option. Like, if your kid doesn't want to take their diabetic medication, their insulin, you say, okay, well, it's your choice. Would it be their choice?
Yeah.
No.
No.
And so I'm not going to let my kid destroy the family, destroy themselves because they choose to have all the control over it. They don't think there's a problem. They're the only one who doesn't think it's a problem. So I say they can do it happily or unhappily. And so I'll give you an example. We've had many kids come through our program where they're like, I'm holding out. I'm not doing it. In fact, my daughter was one of those. She, for the first 3 weeks of the program, she didn't do anything. She just sat there. I'm not doing it. Yeah, I'm not doing it. And I said, you know what's wonderful? We have great insurance. We're going to stay here until you start. And she was probably 4 weeks in before she's like, I yield, and started doing treatment. That happens all the time. We get these kids in like, I'm not doing it. Okay, great. Well, but you are still going to keep coming because I can get you to get here. And we'll just keep doing it until you do it. Because what's the option? If you don't, then they're just existing through life and everybody else is being destroyed by what's happening. That's not fair. And so this is not just their choice. It's the family's choice. Like this is happening happily or unhappily.
Yeah. No, I like that because it is a struggle, and can be in the home, and it, when it starts affecting the kid.
And then I would actually add the other thing a parent can do, if they totally refuse, they won't even get in the car to go to treatment, stop accommodating. Do nothing to make all of their fears and worries better. Let them implode. So if they're worried about getting somebody sick, and then what happens is that kid starts making you protect the family and protect the house. You make sure you're getting your grossness everywhere. There's no for that. I'm telling you, like, there's no accommodations. Hey, you need to wash your hands before you go in there. You mean like this? And I'm smothering all over. Nope. They want you to talk for them. Don't talk for them. If somebody's asking them a question, don't answer it and let them shy away.
Yeah.
Don't save them. Let them, because maybe that's part of it, is that they think they're fine because they do have everybody around them making it better for them.
Yeah. No, that's awesome advice, Paul. So
it's really good advice.
Yeah.
So, Paul, it has been so wonderful having you on our podcast. We always like to end our podcast by asking our guests, who is one of your heroes and why?
I would actually say that I don't actually have a hero from history specifically, but I would say that but I do feel that anybody who stands up for the convictions of their life, and let's say anyone who showed kindness and love to others, anyone who looked at what they could do for the world instead of what the world could do for them, I would absolutely consider to be my hero.
Yeah.
Oh, Paul, I love that.
That's amazing.
So I think one thing with we now, I want to say physical health, mental health.
I know.
Is it does increase your compassion and look at people in a different light.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's one of the things we can learn from it is you don't know what anyone else is going through or why they exploded at that moment or why they're not getting their schoolwork done or why, and I think the bigger lesson to be learned is compassion and love over whether I get the A. And even as a parent, like sometimes it's hard because I feel like it's reflecting on me poorly, right? If my child, and that's why I love the concept in even the DPT skills of radical acceptance of
right.
We can do the best we can, but we have to accept other people and their choices, and all that I can do is change me, and so it is beautiful, all of it, and the skills. And I couldn't say again how much we appreciate you and your work. Thank you for doing your mission of starting the OCD and Anxiety Center. So
thank you so much. We love what we're doing, and we're going to keep on going.
Awesome.
How can people, if they're feel that maybe they have a child who has anxiety, how could they reach out to you and contact your clinics?
Yeah, you can go online, the OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center.com, or our phone number is 801-298-2000. And what's great is you can just reach out to our admissions department. And if you're not sure exactly what's going on, the great part is we start out with an intake. Let's just do some great testing, and we'll ask some questions, and we'll be able to, if there is a diagnosis to be had, we'll get one too. And some people are so scared of having a diagnosis. Okay, but if it's a physical health issue, oh, don't tell me that it's diabetes, because then that will define who I am.
Yeah.
Nope, you have diabetes, and because of that, we know how to treat it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same thing with mental health. It's like, let's know what's there, so we know how to treat it.
Yeah.
And so if you're not sure what to do, start out with an intake. And if you don't come to us, that's okay. But if they do have OCD or anxiety, if the therapist needs to they need to be able to be a specialist in exposure and response prevention.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Diamond Education Podcast.
You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook
at Diamond Education, DIMOND, or on our website, diamonded.com.